Welcome to the Old Dad Jazz Podcast. I'm your host, Matthias, or Matt, whatever you want to call me. And I'm here with nishamanek, and she's a MD. She's a rheumatologist, and she was, I believe, assisting Tiller, and or at least meeting Tiller on Thursdays for a long while. And even though she's not a quote unquote scientist, he entrusts her with a lot of his insights, and she came up with a book that we're going to talk about today. So welcome, nishamanek.
Hey, Matt, it's great to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me. This is very exciting.
So Bridging Science and Spirit. I read the book, and wow, there's a lot in the book to unpack. So first of all, I really love that in the beginning of the book, he says to meditate. He's like, if you want to work on this, you got to meditate.
So, I'm a medical doctor by profession, and I've been a very academic sort of physician. What that means is I went to med school in Scotland, in the UK, did training in London. I'm a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians. So, these are benchmarks in excellence in medical sciences. So I'm very much of that analytical finding out what's wrong with the human body, the human illnesses. And so here I am at the Mayo Clinic, which is really a very astoundingly good place for conventional care. And there we do prescriptions. We analyze the body's chemistry and we prescribe medications. This is the paradigm for modern medicine. And I knew, though, that there is a very limited way of thinking. Okay, this is A causes B causes C, and you try to, fix things. And, I think it gets us a long way, but we quickly run into limitations. So I was really looking at this whole notion of the energetic systems in the body, which we cannot see in medicine. So if I were in anatomy class and I do my dissection, I don't see these things. So I'm looking at research around the energy systems, and whose work do I run into is Bill Tiller, okay, William Tiller. And he coined the term subtle energies. Subtle energies, and he wrote many papers in medical journals, so I could get access to this work. And wouldn't you know, I'm reading them. I couldn't understand his work. It's really, really tough when you have equations and terminology that in medicine I'm not familiar with it. Okay, so I contacted him many times, and I was very, very persistent, and finally he agreed to meet with me in Arizona. I was attending a medical conference. I was giving a talk. And so it was during that dinner, and I really went into his book, Psychoenergetic Science, and I had all these questions. But what came out of that really beautiful dinner meeting was the fact that Tiller is a physicist of the highest caliber. But he's also, this outer knowledge is almost balanced or informed by the inner work. The inner work is so obviously evident in how he approaches the interactions, okay? It wasn't this high and mighty. No, yeah, it wasn't this, hey, and he didn't answer me for a long time. I discovered later on, I thought I had this story in my head that he's not writing to me. Why would he? I'm just a physician. I'm not a physicist. I'm trying to enter into a universe. He's not going to let me in. Okay, there are these academic mindsets, but that was the furthest thing from his mind. The simple truth was this: Tiller does not own a computer. He doesn't check emails.
Oh.
Okay, so what he does is a very old professor style. He writes things. He responds in a very written, old professorial style. And so the email that I would send to him would go to his associate, Walter Dibble. And Dibble would not know what to make of these emails from this doctor, but he would tell Bill, hey, there is somebody, and she seems very interested in your work, but there's no specific question. I just said, I want to meet you. That wasn't making much headway. So finally, I did say, I want to have dinner with you. And that's when Dibble says, okay, So I met him. So this person, Tiller, is very balanced in his outer and inner work. And initially, when I left the dinner meeting, he said no. When I asked him, would you mentor me? I think this is really amazing. I don't understand it. And I think we need to translate it. And it was really for my understanding. That's what I came to Tiller with, was my own unpacking of his ideas. Something told me it was the truth. How did I know I didn't know? I mean, that's the real conundrum. Something inside of me responded. So when he actually had a change of heart that, Nisha, okay, I've had a second thought. I think we could work together, but your role is not to do experiments. You don't need to replicate Tiller's work, or my work. But what you need to do is, if you can communicate to medicine, your colleagues. I even remember he says, if you can communicate to your colleagues something about my work, then I think you can move medicine forward in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even use the word information medicine or the words information medicine. And so that phone call, he told me, before I accept you as a mentee, you need to meditate. That's what you're referring to.
Right.
So the first condition was no money. I have no money, no funding. You're on your own on this. Okay. And the second thing was, you need to meditate. Now, he didn't give me any directions. He didn't say you do it this way or this much in terms of time. No, that was up to me. But he was very, very clear. You need to meditate before I can work with you. And that was tremendous. Yeah.
But it's important, so that you said himself, he started meditating, I think, in the 70s or 60s, and he's had a long continuous practice of meditating practice, and I think that's serving him well, because he's seeing beyond the normal Newtonian or whatever the paradigm of science right now is, that the materialistic only exists, and beyond what you can measure, that let's not go there, because if like Sheldrake's work, I often on this podcast, I mentioned a couple of times Sheldrake, and they don't let him his experiments with telepathy and science of getting stared at, and even the phone calls, like name 4 people that you're the closest with, and by chance it'll be 25%, but he gets 45%, and science kind of dismisses that as weird.
Well, science has this classical physics. Newton's physics is classical. Even Einstein was classical, okay? Because you can see things. You can see light. You can see big Jupiter and its moons and how it orbits. You can measure those things. They're very classical physics. And then you can go all the way down from the biggest bodies in nature down to the quantum level, which is particle physics. And somehow those classical notions actually break down in quantum mechanics. And we have those wave-particle dualities, one very well-known, piece of the puzzle in quantum mechanics. How Tiller goes with all of this is quite unique in the sense that he is dealing with invisible things, okay? Consciousness is invisible. Sheldrake is dealing with invisible, capabilities of humans, which are psychoenergetic, okay? But they're very real. Matthias, when as I was researching the physics around bridging science and spirit, people think, who are my favorite physicists? And I'll tell you, there were 3 names that now come up for me as a physician, as somebody who's now gone into the science a little bit, if you want me to share with you, because it comes into this whole notion, why does science take so long to accept certain truths. And the first one was actually Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell. He's a Scottish physicist in the 1800s, and he unified electricity and magnetism. He made it electromagnetism. It is a huge, huge jump in humankind's evolution, Maxwell's equations, okay? Because in the 1800s, people thought electricity and magnets are separate phenomena in nature. Maxwell is saying, no, they're equivalent. It's the same thing. So a
Right.
magnet, you move it, you get electricity. Electricity creates magnets. We use this all the time now, right? So at that time, Maxwell, he has this immense insight into the unification of magnetism and electricity. But here's the real juice about Maxwell. And even Einstein has written around this. Maxwell said that although you see a magnet, pretend this is a magnet, it's a mouse, it
Yeah.
has invisible fields around it. The word field. You have an object and you have an invisible circle of influence extending away from the body, which is the field. I have a field around me. We call it the biofield. Maxwell introduced this concept of fields, invisible, but we know they're there. So Maxwell was a genius. I mean, he put that as part of nature. It's not only things we can see and measure, this mouse and this computer and Matthias with his headphones, but there are fields around, okay? And he was saying it with electromagnetic or EMF fields, right? So we now know that. At that time, this was really a very radical notion, the word fields. The second physicist, in my view, that is, again, dealing with invisible world or invisible nature is Ludwig Boltzmann. Ludwig Boltzmann championed the idea of atoms, atomism. Now, when he was doing his physics in Graf, Vienna, Austria, okay? I think it was the University of Graf. But anyway, the point here is this. Boltzmann said, anytime you have a steam engine, that was the time of the Industrial Revolution, and he said that there are these molecules, atoms, which are bouncing around, which are causing pressure. It is this that we're measuring in temperature and pressure and volume, those macroscopic qualities. It is this little microscopic things which are the average thing that we're measuring. But nobody had seen atoms. No one had seen these things. And they thought he was crazy. Why in God's name would you want to have atoms? I mean, he was actually, accused, you might say, of being foolish.
Wait, what did they believe before? What did they believe before atoms?
There was no such atomic theory at all. They just said the equations predict how a steam engine moves. We can understand it. The physics is closed. There's no need for anything further. Boltzmann said, no, there is more to this whole story than just this pressure and volume and temperature measurements, which you can do. It's the average behavior of huge numbers of molecules or atoms. Really, it was atomic. So within a few years is a book published by Perry. He was a French physicist who said, yeah, atomic theory is correct. Even the Brownian motion that you see in a microscope, those little things that are wiggling around, those are particles which are wiggling around because they're hitting each other. So this was, even Einstein had looked at that and calculated the Avogadro's number, which is how many molecules there are in a certain volume of stuff. Okay, it's a standard of physics or chemistry. Okay, so Avogadro's number came from those observations of things just wiggling about, or Brownian motion. So we have Boltzmann, he knows there's something more to this whole thermodynamics than what you can see with your naked eyes or macroscopic behaviors. You have Maxwell talking about field effects, and then you have the genius of Paul Dirac, who says, okay, let's look at equations of little things and equations of massive things. But the electron, you can have approximation with those classical equations. They come close, but he says that's not good enough. Let's try and unite these. And then came the Dirac equations. But from the Dirac equations, he predicted antimatter. He predicted there has to be electron, but also an opposite particle, the positron. Okay, and that's the first time that equations had predicted something that was discovered later.
Wow. So
Okay, that was 4 years later.
It's almost like in a spiritual sense, whenever there's something really good, there'll be something really bad trying to, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Well, you're leaping a little ahead there, but Matt, I guess, spirituality tells us things and science confirms it. Science does come later, but spirituality is also scientific in its methods. Okay, and I've often said that, in science, we go to a lab with certain conditions, we describe those conditions, and then we put a protocol.
Right.
Those protocols are precise and the outcomes are precise, then we interpret them. But just think about it, in spirituality, it's the same thing. We prescribe a mantra, do the mantra, set the conditions right. And then, in Tibetan spirituality, the teacher, the guru will ask, have you had this happen to you? What's the outcome? So it seems like to me, spirituality has its protocol, science has its protocol, spirituality has its outcomes, science
That's very
has its
interesting.
outcomes.
Like if you do certain things, then if you experiment, you can call it even an experiment. You can say if you meditate for a certain amount of time, for a month, for 3 months, and track your progress, you can be very meticulous and be like, yeah, I'm feeling better, You can be like that,
Exactly. So this is a citizen scientist. Don't take everything that we are saying at face value. You must find out for yourself.
Right.
Always.
I want to go back to the Dirac equation. So what implication does that there's an opposite always, what implication does have on Tiller's work? Because Tiller's work is soul energy. So how does that relate to the soul energy?
So Dirac stumbled into the biggest secrets of nature, which is, and even the word secret is a little bit, I'm overusing it perhaps, but nature has symmetries, okay? And to describe nature's behavior in many realms, you need symmetries in terms of equations, in terms of exchange of particles. Say in the neutron and protons, when they exchange particles, you need symmetry in laws of nature and equations to describe them, and then to describe them accurately, and there's been confirmed by observation, okay, in the particle colliders. Now, Tiller, what was very interesting was that this symmetries were then applied in materials way to crystals. Crystals are highly symmetrical objects, okay? You have the atoms arranged in a very precise, symmetrical way in a lattice-like arrangement, which gives you properties of matter which are quite extraordinary. Diamond is one of them, okay, carbon. And so Tiller was actually one of the world's experts in crystals. He's the world's expert in crystallography and a material scientist. So he already knew the laws of physics that describe symmetry in great detail. It's called group theory, okay? And we won't go into that, but group theory is just various ways you use symmetry to create new things, new patterns.
Right. So basically the nature has, there's always a need for symmetry. There will always be, whatever shape there is, there will always try to be a symmetry. And then as it changes, that will just try to be symmetric as well. Is that correct?
Well, yes, but it's also inherent in nature, and also the fact that man can use that symmetry for advantage, okay? So we can create new materials and silicon and transmitter chips and all of that. That's symmetry. Okay. And
Okay.
so what was very interesting is that particle physics used gauge theory to describe um, space itself. You have to have you have gauge 1, which is electromagnetic, then you have SU2 gauge, 3 gauge, 4, and so on, and
Okay.
infinite.
Okay.
Okay.
You're losing me a bit there.
Yeah. Okay. So
So
it's just the gauges are simply the rules and the number of variables needed to describe something. Okay.
okay.
So in U1 gauge electromagnetism, so a particle has a direction and in a certain plane, and you just need 2 variables to describe it. In
Right.
SU2, you need 3 and 4 and so on. Okay. SU3, you need more. And then as you go higher and higher in gauge symmetries, it's even finer information. You need more variables to accurately understand and describe something. Okay,
Right.
that's all. Just don't get too lost in it. It's simply a descriptor of nature.
So, but basically, it's a thing you can measure. There are some instruments that you can measure these things that you're talking about.
At least in the U1, which is electromagnetism or the standard model, that's the that's leptons, quarks, electrons, all of the Higgs boson was the most recent one, okay, in 2012. So that's the standard model. Everything's filled there. All the house, as I call it, is complete. Um, and then when you go beyond electromagnetism, then you're going to SU2. Beyond that is SU3. Okay, so you can actually describe with equations these 3 levels. Beyond that is very high. These are higher and higher. And I'm not a physicist, but I think we're going to evolve our science and our instruments to get there.
Right.
We
Right.
will get there. Yeah.
So right now it's able to only measure electromagnetism, and then the others you figure out by.
Accurately, yes.
Okay. Got it.
Electromagnetism is where our world is. If I look around, the light is shining. I'm talking to you through the computer, Zoom link. That's electromagnetism all
Right.
the
Right.
way.
Right.
Any information is being transmitted, but it's through EMF waves. Okay, and then it's
Okay.
decoded. Yeah.
So how did I'm interested in the pH change of water because that's very interesting. So it basically started with a intention in device that was that you imprint an intention on. So that's
Okay.
for standard science. That's already kind of like, oh, what are you doing? But the thing is, I was once trying to explain it to somebody, but he wanted more data, so I failed miserably. So this is part of the reason why we're here, because this is actually simple stuff, but it's also complicated. But if you can
Yes.
explain it
Yeah,
properly, I
so
think.
here actually I have a bottle of water, and just a moment, I'm going to
All
take
right,
a quick drink here.
there we
So
go.
here, we've got a bottle of water
That's
here.
it. Water is very important.
It is very important. So Tiller approached the whole question from the perspective of classical physics, that when you hold an intention, you can't change any material out there in a measurable way. That's our assumption.
Right.
It's an assumption. We all know that. That's what we call objective science. That I'm here and this water is over there and I'm physically separate from it. I can sit here and intend forever about let me increase the temperature of this water, let me freeze this water, let me do something to this water in a measurable way.
Right.
Okay, so but that assumption holds true more or less.
Right.
So but Tiller says, okay, let's test this out. Let's test this, because the assumption seems to hold, but I think we have to test it out formally, but not using brain science. He didn't he you see, consciousness in the Tiller's world, and I agree with him, is not locked in your skull. It's not your brain doing something. Okay, your brain is a perfect receiver, beautiful receiver. It has many neural links. We're talking to each other because I can do that with my brain, but it's not the source of my consciousness. Okay.
Yeah, that's
It's an
already very
interface.
controversial for science.
Yes, it is, and we won't go there. But you
Well, we
asked
can go
about the
there,
water.
but we can go there. But I'm interested in. So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, is Tiller found a way that there is a, even though I might not be able to change the water I have to ice or steam, but my intention, there is that small particle, that small change that you can actually do something with the water that's out of the ordinary realm, right?
Yes, you can. So it takes a great deal of discipline, first of all. That's one of the conditions, that you're having to hold an intention absolutely without doubt. No doubt. And so Tiller said, okay, he drew up a protocol. This was unprecedented because no such protocol exists. He
Right.
had to create a protocol, and he says, you have to say, what is the change in water that we can measure on a continual basis? Because would this even work? It sounds crazy, right? He chose pH because you can do that continuously. You could do a lot of things continuously, but that's what he chose. And there are meters, pH meters of 0.001 pH units. You can't do this with
Wait, hold
litmus
on.
paper.
So
Yeah,
if he wanted to, he could he say, change to intend to change the temperature?
he could have. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Actually, let me give you. Actually, I'm
Okay.
going to sidetrack a little bit here. When I was meeting him and Jean Tiller for dinner one time, and it was summer in Arizona. It's very hot there. It's 120 outside. So, you can fry in the desert. It's
Yeah.
dry, bone dry, 120. And I'm in with the Tillers having dinner. You know what Dr. Tiller said to me? He says, Nisha, Jean and I imprinted one of the devices that we plugged into our home to make the interior temperature exactly 72 degrees.
Come on.
Oh, and then I said, oh, tell me more. He says, so our temperature is 72 degrees. We don't use much air conditioning. It just we regulate it with our intention.
What?
Exactly.
This reminds me. I'm not gonna say her name, but I remember once there was this woman I met, and she told me that she intended on staying that weight, and that there was unwavering intention, and that she just stays at that weight. It never changes.
Yeah. So you see, our consciousness has enormous power,
Right.
but we are not coherent enough.
Coherent meaning that you doubt
It's
and
not
you're
one
like,
pointed. It's
yeah,
just, okay,
yeah,
it's like a light bulb. In the end of the book, I even say a light bulb is scattered photons. It lights a little bit, it's doing its job. But a self-illumined man, a Buddha-like consciousness, which is Tiller is an adept. He's masterful at this. So when he makes up his mind or holds an intention, he can do it. Okay?
right. But that would signify as well that he's already pretty spiritually advanced. So he's the benefit of that is he's a really Stanford scientist, but he's also spiritually evolved to the sufficient
Yes.
degree. So he has both at the same time. So his intentions and the other meditators, because I believe you
Yeah.
said that he takes on people that have been long time meditators, so they're very good at intending,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
So Matthias, you bring a very important point. Tiller gave meaning. He gave a lot of meaning to this experiment. He is a scientist of the most excellent kind. I mean, this is a stupendous mind, okay? But he also did this protocol and he gave meaning to it. It was not some foolish thing on the side here. He took time, created a protocol, and yes, when you are going to change a material like water,
Mm.
how do we know? There's no precedent in the scientific literature whether the intention will do this, change pH. Will it take a day? Will it take weeks? Will it take months? Will it ever happen? We
Right.
don't know. Okay?
Okay, I have
So,
this question because it occurred to my mind. So I don't know anything about physics or any, like my knowledge is poor, but if so the audience knows, because maybe my audience maybe some of them don't know either. If you leave water just like that for weeks on end, the how much does pH change in water?
it doesn't. It
doesn't.
won't. It will equilibrate with carbon dioxide in the air, which will dissolve in it, but you have to seal it then. Okay, you're not sort of keeping it open. It'll just evaporate and you have no water. So they're
Right. Okay.
sealed. Okay,
Okay.
and there's a pH meter and they're monitoring it. Okay, so it is under very um, lab conditions. It's if you went to the labs, you'll see, oh yeah, it's a low pH, a meter stuck in there, or pH is recording. There's a data collected by the computer. The
Okay.
ambient conditions of the room were also being monitored, because you see in thermodynamics, whenever you do something to a material, then you have to also do the ambient conditions. You know, it's contained, its temperature, air pressure, all of these are going to affect the water.
Right.
That's all Taylor was doing, standard thermodynamic work. There's nothing heroic here. So I'll tell you, he was also blown away. He used these words. We were blown away that our intention could do anything to water.
Wow.
But it did do something. But here's the key. He says, look, Nisha, you can't, I pressed him on this a lot. I said, why put a device? What's the whole use of this thing? Okay. I don't understand this. It seems so weird. I mean, let's face it, right? Matches, why put this device? I forgot to bring my device. I always have my Tiller device mostly with me. Yeah, it's at home. Anyway, so what he realized is that, and this is well-known research, human intention can affect machines from a distance without touching it. Our intention can make something happen.
Like what?
Okay?
Give me an example.
Okay, so random number generators, which is from the Pear Research Lab, if you intend to change a series of numbers, you can do it statistically speaking. The signal is there. It will change. The human can have an impact on the machine in a specific direction.
Oh,
The effects are small. They've done billions of this experiments. Okay.
so it would technically be possible if you're really good at intention, if you go to the casino and try to program the machine.
Actually, it has happened, and I did that experiment.
You did
Can
that.
I describe
Okay.
it? Yes,
Yes.
I did. It's called, and I went with, it's called Monroe Institute,
Yeah,
and they
I've heard
have
of
the
it.
Inner Vegas Adventures. So I went. Actually. So here's what they do. I'll just tell you. Because we have the capacity for entrainment, once you're in a meditative way, you can go into your heart and stay there. This is not a selfish thing. You are of an elevated consciousness. Then you go around the craps table. Craps is where you throw 2 die and you want a certain number. 7 gets you out, which is statistically the most frequent. Okay, I don't know
Right.
the number combinations, but anyway, the craps is 7 and you're out. So I have never played craps in my life. Okay, so I'm throwing the die. And I was in this entrained state, okay? There's a group of us who took this workshop. We all meditate together for an hour or two, and then we go down to the craps floor, the casino floor.
Right.
And by the way, we were banned from the strip. Only a few casinos would allow us there. Yeah. This is a workshop by Joseph Gallenberger.
They
He
saw
has
that
a
you
book.
were cheating. They saw you were manipulating
It's not
matter.
cheating. It's simply that, we are.
No, but
What
they
was
thought you were
interesting is,
cheating. They thought you were
well,
cheating.
what was interesting is that, yes, we didn't lose. I didn't lose a single penny.
What?
I made
Okay.
50. No, I didn't lose. Okay, statistically, for a complete beginner, somebody like me is going to lose money and come up negative from one weekend in Vegas. Absolutely true. It's going to be maybe a slot machine if you make a little money. Okay, but by and
Right.
large, you're going to lose money.
So what happened? So you went there and you
Yeah.
intended to throw a certain number and you got
I
it.
didn't even intend. Okay, I was in a very meditative state, and all of us were. And it's interesting that, when you look at each face, it was like looking at your own self. It's like Christ, okay? And it's hard to describe. It's like saying, even if somebody, those women who bring you drinks around, do you want a drink, a glass of water?
Right.
They come around with their trays. We knew that even if when they say hello, if they touch you by accident, that they can be healed. You're in such a high state of consciousness.
Wow.
Okay?